Hi, it's Sue Stockdale, your host for the Sports 2000 podcast. We take you behind the scenes of this British sports car prototype series that gives drivers the chance to compete at some of the UK and Europe's finest circuits. I talk to some of the people involved in making it happen, the drivers, the sponsors and the champions, to give you an insight into why Sports 2000 is sometimes called motorsport's best kept secret. This episode is a triple bill when I'm speaking to David Gorst, Cindy Pearce and Rob Whitwell. David is a Duratec driver. His company BS Burner Services is also a sponsor of the Duratec Championship. Cindy Pearce is from MCR Race Cars, who manufacture many of the Duratecs we see on the track. And Rob Whitwell is from Australia, driving in the championship down there. And we spoke to him already in episode 14 about racing down under. And he's back with us when we recorded this at Combe. So first to David. Here we are at Combe, at the third race of the Sports 2000 Championship this year. And I am with David Gorst, who's one of the sponsors for the Sports 2000 Championship. Welcome, David.
Thank you.
Now, you are one of the sponsors. What does that involve?
Giving loads of money over?
Do you get a return on that money?
No, definitely not.
So why do you do it?
Well, I love the sport. Wanted to keep racing and we lost the sponsor this year, so I just stood up and been counted, basically.
And it's important that people like you do that. Otherwise, this championship wouldn't exist, I imagine.
Well, it wouldn't, no. But we'd do anything to help where we can. And if we can afford it, I'll do it. So that's it.
Have you been racing for a long time, David?
No, believe it or not, it's the first time I've ever raced in my life. I've been coming with Peter Needham for 10 years, but all of a sudden I decided at 54 that I was going to start racing. So I just jumped into a car, and the fastest one you can get into, and there we are.
And what prompted that decision? If you'd been coming for such a long time, why now to drive?
Well, we got out to lockdown, didn't we? And I was sitting at Snetterton and I seen Tony Jarvis's car was up for sale. So Peter said, go and have that one. I said, well, if I can fit in it, I'll buy it. Unfortunately, I fitted in it. So I was then forced to buy it then. Well, not forced to buy it, I just bought it. And I've always wanted to race in my life. I've always loved motorsport. So opportunity, and there we go. And I'm gradually getting better, but it's still very frightening when we do it. But yeah, it's good.
And what colour is your car and what number is it? I always ask guests on the podcast that question.
Yeah, my car's white and black with 103 on the front.
And did you have to get a special racing licence then when you decided to drive, or did you have that already?
No, I had to get the odds to actually drive the car, so I got the car and then got the racing licence. And
how difficult is it to get that? What does that require?
Just go and have an exam which you've got to pass 100%, and then go on the track, and if they can see that you can keep it on the track, you pass. So basically it, but then you stick the big yellow cross on the back of your car and then learn while you're driving.
And given that you've been watching motorsport for such a long time, what was it like when you then were behind the wheel and actually driving it for yourself? Was it as you imagined it was going to be?
Well, when I first started, no, it was very frightening, very scary, and I was like driving Miss Daisy. But certain stages as you're driving, it changes your mindset and you start to realise the car can do a lot more than what you can do. So you start getting into the flow with it, and hopefully I'm getting better, and I seem to be getting better, but we'll see the end of this season, see where we go.
And what circuits have you raced at so far, and which ones did you like?
I've done all the standard ones for Sports 2, Brands, Silverstone. Alton's my favourite. I do like Alton, not particularly Donington, but I'm getting used to that now. So yeah, wherever the Sports 2, I've been there. And I'm looking forward to Dijon this year as well.
And what is so special about Oulton Park? Because quite a lot of guests that I've interviewed have mentioned Oulton Park. Why is it one that you like driving on?
It's just a very beautiful place to drive in. It's very fluid and I enjoy driving the track. So it's one of the better ones that I enjoy driving.
Now, you mentioned earlier on, David, that you are one of the sponsors and you're wearing a lovely T-shirt, listener, that says BS Burner Services Limited on it, which is the company you run or own?
Yes, it's mine. I own it, yes.
And what does it do?
We're an industrial combustion company, so anything that needs a big burner, I'm talking 30, 40 foot flames or multiples of burners, aluminium melting, steelworks, toilet paper industry, I do that all over the world. So it's quite a niche market. There's not many of us doing it, and it's very busy.
And how did you get into that in the first place?
I met my wife and I moved to the West Midlands because I'm originally a Scouser. I was living in London at the time and I moved up to the West Midlands, didn't have a job. I was originally a plumbing and heating engineer, and one of Karen's friends' dads owned the company. So that was 33 years ago. So I worked for the company and they decided to shut it about 14 years ago and I ended up buying it. So here we are. I employ 8 people and just did what we do, and I enjoy doing it, and I must do for 33 years. So.
And it's funny, it's always a woman that takes a man somewhere, isn't it? Often the pool of love that takes you to a new place to live.
Yeah, well, I won't mention that. I was in Corfu on holiday with my fiancée when I met her.
Now, there's a story we could go into, but perhaps not on this podcast, listener.
No, not at all, because she won't like that.
Now, you're driving in the Sports 2000 Duratec category. In terms of the Duratec, it's a bit different from the historic categories. What's specifically different about it for listeners that haven't been to a race and seen the difference between the two types of cars that race in this championship?
Well, they're a totally different body style for a start, but the engine is the key important bit. It's a 2-litre Duratec, bog standard engine, where the historics are a Pinto engine, which are the older version, basically transit engines. The Duratecs were in Mondeos, and they're a lot faster. But yeah, it's mainly around what the body style is and what the engine is.
So is there more aero grip on a Duratec than there is on a historic?
I believe so, yes. Especially with the new body that we have on there that's been designed by John Eiley. So yes, it is a lot more downforce on it.
John Eiley was a previous guest on the podcast, so you can go listen to his episode and find out all about his background in aerodynamics. Who comes along, if anyone, with you?
Yes, I couldn't do this without the help of John Fletcher. He's my key man. I've got my son who's another key person with it. I also have Matt Bethel and his dad. So yeah, I'm quite well supported. My daughters come now and again, but John Fletcher is the one. Basically, if you have a look at my car, it's pristine, and that's all down to John, because he's got OCD with polishing, so it has to be all clean and tidy. But it really does help the race car if it is clean at the start, and if you have a race and you have a leak or a problem, you notice it straight away. So it just helps with, so we spend a lot of weekends stripping the car down before we come to a race, getting it ready, and then come racing.
I was going to ask that. Were you involved in that preparation process? It sounds like you are.
Yeah, so all through the winter we stripped everything off. It had it all polished up and re-sandblasted and powder coated, new bearings everywhere. So it just helps keeping everything on top and pristine. And the more pristine it is, the easier it is to work on, and we can see things straight away. And
I'm sure there's a level of pride driving onto circuit when you've got a car that looks so spick and span.
Well, it was like at Brands Hatch. We had a couple of Fantech people come over from the GT3s, and I was in the holding area, and he looked at the car and he said, bloody hell, that looks lovely. And the guy actually came over on the Sunday morning to look and come and have a look at the car and to see what is involved in the car, and he couldn't believe for what we pay for these cars compared to the GT3s. He says, and we're just as fast. He says it's a no-brainer, really. He said he'd jump in one of these if he could afford one. So, yeah, it is a lot of pride. I do like to have it looking nice, and so does John. And if John wants to polish it and clean it, we'd just let them get on with it. So, yeah, it's good. But it always looks nice on track.
And finally, David, looking ahead to the rest of the season, what are you particularly looking forward to?
Just racing and improving my times. Obviously, being new to it, I've been at the back for quite a few years, but my starts are very good. If we could have 60-metre races, that'd be great. But just doing it and just improving myself and just making sure that I try to get up in the mix with the back crew in the middle and try and go better. It's just trying to keep that continuity up with trying to get faster. And with the work we're doing on the car, the setups on the car now, and just mentality, it does help with what we're doing. So get better at it and stay on the track, basically. Am I scared doing it? Yes. Do I enjoy it? Yes. No, I'm really enjoying it, and as long as I can keep fit and doing it, I'm going to carry on doing it.
Well, thank you for your time in having this conversation, David. I wish you all the best, and of course thank you for your sponsorship of the championship.
That's no problem, and good luck to everybody out there this year.
Well, thanks to David for sharing his insights with us. And so the next person I caught up with at Duratecs was Cindy Pearce, who along with Clive Hayes make up MCR Race Cars. Now, you just mentioned to me that the MCRs that are out on the track, all of them are made by you.
The MCRs are made by me, Clive and Richard and Anthony, yeah.
So what does that involve?
Well, it's the complete car, from building the chassis, all the suspension, putting the whole thing together, the bodywork, the whole lot.
And where does the design come from then? Because obviously creating and building a race car doesn't just happen.
Originally, Clive fancied a race car by a designer from Brazil, Luis Fernando Cruz. And a friend of his, Matt Manderson, bought 2 cars over. Matt didn't have time to do anything with them. So we bought one, and then Clive crashed and used the parts on the other one. And then we rang Louis and said, we fancy taking over MCR Race Cars here, and that's what we done. So we started the business officially in 2007.
And how did you then know there would be a market for those cars in the UK?
Sports 2000 was predominantly Pintos at the time, and it was getting into Duratecs, so trying to bring a little bit more modern blood into the championship. And there weren't many cars around, and most of them that had gone into the Duratec Championship were converted Pintos. So we bought in some new ones. Yeah.
And how do you advertise your cars to your potential market? Is it coming to races like this? Here we are at Brands Hatch this weekend. Is it the evidence on the track? People go, wow, that's a great car, I want one of those.
People seeing the cars at the race circuit. We used to do stands at the Autosport show. sometimes share it with Sports 2000. Other times we'd have our own stand. People started to convert from Pintos into Duratecs, or friends were interested and they bought cars, and it just snowballed from there.
And are you building to order then? I'm imagining if you suddenly got a glut of orders, how would you have the capacity for building them?
No, we don't want to be a massive business. It's nice that we know all our customers and race with them and keep in touch with them. So, yeah, we try and do 1 or 2 new ones a year, and then just people upgrade as they go along normally.
And when you're then keeping pace with obviously the developments in cars, technologies and so on, how are you making sure that your design's developing?
So we've changed a bit since Louis first designed the car, and we've been working along with University of Wales Trinity St David. They have 2 of our cars here, and also John Eiley, who was a Formula 1 aerodynamicist. And the car's just been developing as we go along bit by bit.
And if we were looking into the future, what's the ambitions for MCR?
I think we're quite happy running with the Sports 2000. We have got a car with a bigger engine in, which Clive will be racing next weekend. But no real plans to go down that direction. It's just concentrating on Sports 2000, really.
So the sense I'm getting from what you're saying is about delivering a quality car and then looking after your customers that have them.
Yeah, we like being here at the championship with the customers. It's nice.
When somebody then buys an MCR and then decides to race it, the Duratec Championship, what is it that you're providing for them in terms of support?
So when they first have the cars have a basic setup, and then the customers can change the setup on the cars to suit their own style of driving. We bring spares along to the circuit, and if anybody needs help or advice, then they're back and forth to the lorry, which is all day, every day. But they're nice people. Yeah.
And another aspect that I've asked other guests on the podcast, Cindy, is about what their sense of the Sports 2000 community is. I'm wondering how you would describe being here in the paddock and being part of the community.
Yeah, they're all really nice guys. We're all different sorts. It's an interesting crowd. But everybody gets on really well together. And then when they're on the circuit, they're out and out racing. But it is gentlemen driving. They're polite. They have manners.
And in terms of the circuits that you attend to support your drivers, are there any circuits that the Sports 2000 go to that you particularly enjoy more than others?
No, enjoy them all, but we're starting to do European rounds again, which is really nice. So that's like all of us away on a holiday together.
So Cindy, tell me about your racing history.
When I first got together with Clive, he never told me that he used to race. So I bought him a try-in a race car for a birthday present, and one for me as well, of course. Yeah, thoroughly enjoyed it and didn't realise that he was trying to have a break from it, but he got addicted again. So we started doing sprints and hill climbs in a shared car, and then went on to racing. And I used to race in either a Rover 216 GTI, or there used to be little global lights. I could look after that myself while Clive done the technical stuff on his race cars.
What did racing, what did it give you?
I just enjoyed the thrill of trying to hammer them in. I'm not a brilliant racing driver. It was foot flat on the floor and hope for the best. So sometimes I would go extremely fast, and then when I get back in, Clive would tell me that it's because the wing had dropped off. I didn't even notice. So it's just foot flat on the floor and hope for the best.
So the thrill of the speed.
Yeah.
And when you watch the Duratecs going around this weekend at Brands Hatch, are you like the proud mum that we made those cars? And
oh, definitely. Yeah. They're real. I love the cars. Yeah. It's really awkward I don't have a favourite. You can't have favourites. All the guys are lovely. They're all different. But yes, we're running David Horton, so we've got to push David. They're all lovely.
David did pretty well today.
He's done really well. Yes, really well. Yeah, he's very pleased.
And have you raced in a Duratec or driven a Duratec?
Oh, to the fear of Clive, yeah. After the race season had finished, I entered into a Guinness Book of Records race with the most ladies on the track at any one time. Didn't have a race history for them to base the handicapped on, so they gave me Patrick Sherrington's race times. Patrick's won the championship a few times. And I started at the back of the grid, and I'd done the foot flat on the floor job.
Yeah.
And I did pass loads of cars, done really well, but everybody that was there watching, Sports 2000 guys come to cheer me on. It was the wettest race they'd ever seen, and they still kept going. But no, I spun so fast, I snapped the wing off. I'd done a few things, but not too bad. I've done all right.
And did the race get into the Guinness Book of Records then?
You know, I never chased it up. I don't know. No, I'll have to have a look.
Where did it take place? Where was the race? What circuit?
It was at Silverstone. I had Clive's race suit on, Mike Turner's race helmet, full of gloves because it was too big, and it poured down with rain, so I looked absolutely ridiculous, yeah.
That sounds like that was quite a challenge.
It was good fun. Yeah.
So would you go back in another MCR in the future?
No, I wouldn't race again, I don't think.
If you could drive any car, Cindy, what would you think would be your favourite car to drive?
Race car, let's have a look. Oh, I can't remember the name of it. It's not exactly a race. It's in France, and it's dirt and sand track, and it's the last car still going. So you ram each other and cars turn upside down and go over sandbanks and stuff. And yeah, I'd be better at that than I would on a proper racetrack. Yes, I enjoy something like that.
Sounds like you're a bit of a thrill seeker, Cindy.
A bit.
It's been lovely to talk to you today, get to know a bit about yourself and about MCR Race Cars. And I look forward to seeing you at another circuit later in the season.
Lovely, thank you.
Well, thanks to Cindy for that conversation. And finally, we turn to Rob Whitwell, who I've spoken to before, and here he was back at Castle Combe to give us his impressions of the race. So here I'm with Rob Whitwell today. Now, Rob, you've come all the way from Australia today to be here. What's your impressions of this race?
I had to come back again. Last year was great at Thruxton Park, so I wanted to come back and see how the boys were going again this year. A lot more at this circuit. It seems to be a lot more lower key. You don't have the pit garages or anything like that. Everybody's on the grass under an easy up, but it's once again very family environment and just lots of fun. So wheels off, engines being played with, back off gearboxes, gears being sorted out. It's a fantastic day out.
And Rob, we interviewed you for one of the previous episodes on the podcast, and you talked about your experience of driving a Sports 2000, a Tiger, in Australia. What's your season been like so far? What's the racing been like?
Well, our season in Australia was really from sort of October right through until sort of September again. So we have a full year around there. But we were lucky enough this year. We had Clive Steeper and John Harmer came out for the Phillip Island Classic historic meeting in Victoria in Australia, and they drove my car there. We had a lot of fun over the 4-day meeting, and I wish it had run a bit better than what it did, but they hurried up a lot of our guys. We had 14 2000s on the grid, sitting in amongst some Pro Sports and McLarens and other things. So big grid, very fast at Phillip Island. Weather was perfect, a bit like here today, and it's just a great standard of racing.
And is there a similar family feel to turning up a Sports 2000 race in Australia?
Absolutely, absolutely. Our meetings that we run at are basically the big historic meetings. So they generally bring a number of international drivers out and international cars that are running there. But it's exactly the same. It's just families and kids and husbands and wives and partners that are there all the time. And very similar to this. You can't ask for more. It's just great fun.
One of the things that I wonder which might be different is the distance that people have to travel to get to a race. Now here we have a Dutch competitor that often shows up in this championship, Peter Brewer, who I've interviewed before. Given that Australia is such a large country, how far afield are the competitors typically travelling to actually get to a race?
Okay, well, at Phillip Island, at that meeting, as I said, we had 14 S2000s there, but that was amongst a total car count, I think, of 454 cars that were at the meeting, so it was big. But in the S2000s, we had guys from Queensland there, and they travelled down in convoy. I think there were 5 of them, and that was 2 solid days of of driving, 18 hours of driving to get to the track. So other guys are coming across from Western Australia and they would come across and do, say, 3 meetings or 4 meetings over a 6-week period. But that's a 4-day drive, 5-day drive to get from one side of Australia to the other. So they're massive commitments of time and money, really. It's not a cheap proposition. Those guys would be bringing not necessarily a Pantech, but a big transporter and perhaps 1 or 2 cars in it. So they're big commitments. I'm just looking across the paddock at the moment at a massive Pantech with a full awning and 5 cars inside it. I think there is. It's just an unbelievable setup. So beautiful. It's just really exciting to see this sort of stuff happening.
It does sound like there's similarities and yet differences. Do you now have a sense, Rob, that you're part of a Sports 2000 community worldwide, given that you're now here and got a sense of who drives in this category?
Oh yes, I think you really do. I think the social media aspect of it makes a big difference. Over the last few years in particular, I think probably post-COVID, the aspect of websites and Facebook pages that are for the S2000 groups from America, Australia and the UK, you've got people that are members of each of those sites from all around the world and are getting and commenting, providing information, comments back to help different guys with what's going on with their cars. So yes, and I think you feel comfortable enough. I certainly feel comfortable to be able to come over here and talk to the guys and get advice and assistance and to see the little things that they're doing that are different than what we're doing in Australia. Like in particular here, one thing I'd say, the guys are really conscious about fuel load in their cars, draining it after the race and qualifying and then putting just the right amounts into for the race ahead. We don't tend to be as finicky as that in Australia. We're sort of say, yep, she'll be right, mate. As long as we don't run out on the track, we'll be fine. But it's great to see. It's a committed and professional type approach to motor racing.
And what other differences have you spotted in going around the paddock today, Rob?
I think the big difference that I see here is the Yokohama tyres. We're running Hoosiers and Avons in Australia generally, and I'm actually running Kumos at the moment, and they're just far too hard, my Kumos. The Hoosiers are okay, but I think these Yokohama tyres are a big improvement on what we're running, and I just wish we had them in Australia. They're not available in Australia at the moment, but I might be taking back a set in my luggage, I think, this year. So I suppose the best part about it is it's not raining. The last race I had 2 weeks ago at a place called Winton in Victoria, it absolutely poured down, and when I was coming over here, I thought it was actually going to be wet today. I was going to see just how these blokes handle the wet weather, because it's the only real race I've had in the wet a couple of weeks ago, and it was like sitting in a bathtub and just had water sloshing around me. And I couldn't believe how wet it was inside the car, but it's ended up such a beautiful day. I don't know how you handle the wet here now anyway, so...
Well, it's great to speak to you today, Rob, and it's lovely to get your perspective on this meeting here and how it compares to being in Australia.
Thank you very much indeed. I appreciate the time.
Well, wasn't that a bumper-filled episode? Thanks to David and Cindy and Rob for their conversations today. Remember, please help us to spread the word about this podcast by leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts or whatever platform you listen to your podcasts on. And tell your friends about it too. You can connect with us at Sports 2000 via Facebook, Instagram or Twitter. And I look forward to connecting with you again soon for our next episode.